welcome to the Wild Wonder podcast, where we seek to democratize and demystify holistic wellness practices by speaking with today's leading practitioners. I am your host, Kristen Yorka, and today on the podcast we have the Nourishing Witch, Andrea. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so a little backstory on how we virtually met was through one of Gala Darling's courses. And you came on, and I remember you speaking about human design actually twice. Once on a call, and then another time she actually interviewed you. And I was like, what is this? Why don't I know anything about this? What on earth is she talking about? Sounds super cool, but I have zero idea starting at square one. So if you don't mind, for people like me, I'd like to learn along with the audience. Do you have like an abridged version of what human design is?
Yes. So human design is a synthesis of different systems and different modalities. So it kind of like brings all these systems that have been developing with human beings for centuries, and it brings them together in a way that the result is the sum of the parts, but also something new, like a fresher, different way of understanding certain things. So ultimately what it gives you is an understanding of how your energy circulates through your body and how you have certain things that are consistent within you and certain things that may not, and how when we are operating from the things that are not consistent within us, sometimes we can get into this conditioning and in these patterns that are not really who we're meant to be. So I love the fact that I've loved astrology and like other modalities for a very long time. But this one just, I don't know, there was something in it, not at first glance, I must say, like when you first open your human design charts, I had that when I first opened it. I was like, oh my God, what is all this business? Yes. I didn't understand what they were like numbers. I didn't understand why the numbers didn't make sense. Like I didn't seem like have like a logical order. I was very upset about that.
Because even though it pulls from all these modalities, when you do first see these charts, you're like, but wait, it might as well be written in like hieroglyphs, you know?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So it took a while for me to understand. And I think that when you start understanding what the numbers mean, what the signs mean, what the energy centers that you see in the body graph mean, then it's like, all right, we're talking about this very groovy, very fun territory. And I guess the map just looks a little bit deceiving.
Yeah, it seems complicated because I remember when I first started getting interested in astrology, I pulled the chart. And since you can kind of make the leap from, okay, these are the planets in the sky that I'm familiar with, and this is how the planets in the sky affect me, don't affect me, how I could use these as archetypes to kind of investigate my own inner stuff. Whereas when I pulled up the human design chart, I was like, okay, I'm going to need a professional.
I agree. It's a little bit like that, but also because it has like multiple layers of information. That's the thing that I find so rich about it, and the thing that I love as a student of life, honestly, that it's just layer after layer after layer of things that you can investigate, kind of like learn about yourself, embody, experiment with. Like there's just layers and layers of things that you can explore.
So what does it pull from? Does it pull from astrology?
Yes.
And yes, and what else?
So, astrology, the I Ching, the like chakra system in a way, and quantum physics. So those are kind of like the four big things, and it weaves them in a way that is really incredible and fascinating when you're able to pass through that first hurdle of like how
Yeah. So I know someone's listening right now and they're like, wait, where do I see my chart? So where should they go if they want to pause the podcast right now and then go pull it?
There are multiple websites. The one that I like just because of how it looks, I think is a little bit cleaner. It's called mybodygraph.com.
My body graph?
My body graph. You go there and you just leave your details as you would, with an astrology chart or whatever, and then you get your human design chart.
So you need your name, your time of birth?
Yes.
And
Time of birth is
location.
super important.
Okay.
Time, date, location. Yeah.
What happens if somebody doesn't have their time of birth?
If you have like no freaking clue, absolutely
Yeah.
whatsoever, it's really good that you will find maybe an astrologer that does
Mm.
time correction.
Hmm.
There's like specific, almost like formulas in which like seasoned astrologer can actually
Right.
help you find your time. If you have it more or less, if it's more or less at 2:30 or more or less at 5:30,
Hmm.
whatever that is, put those in, and chances are it's not going to change dramatically.
Hmm.
If it's like a 10 minutes more, 10 minutes less, like that kind of thing is forgiving in certain areas. There are specific sections of your human design chart that are very sensitive to like
Hmm.
time. But for the bigger picture, for the broader things, you can definitely go with that.
Yeah, and I guess it's a matter of like trial and error too, if you don't quite know. Like you see what resonates with you. At least that's what I experienced in astrology. My mom gave me the total wrong time the first time. And I think it came out that I was, I want to say Mars in Pisces or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, none of this makes sense to me. Like I was trying so hard to make it make sense to me. Like, okay, maybe some of this, but not all of this. And it wasn't until my grandma told me the right time that I was like, oh, like, of course.
That makes sense.
Now it makes sense.
Yeah. So the thing that I think can be really useful with that is like indeed like you will have a sense for like, yes, I totally see this. I guess the flip side of that is like you can be conditioned to not recognize what you're seeing. There's a like for me, there were things when I opened my chart for the first time that I was like, really? Like, is it?
Right.
And then with time and with experimenting with it and learning about it and everything, I'm like, yes, 100%.
That's
But
interesting
that
that you said
first,
that because I always think about how Americans specifically are conditioned toward extroversion.
mhm,
And there's so many people when I was studying more in astrology or when I used to do tarot readings that I would present somebody with, what I believe or what I in tune is their real inner self, right? And they'd be like, no, because I love to party and I love to go out and I love to be talking. And I'm seeing this person, I'm like, energetically, I don't know if that's 100% true,
totally, totally. And there's also this part about human design, and this is my personal feeling about it. This is how I have come to it.
Mm.
There's richness and depth and so much beauty to be discovered. And yet there are parts of it that the language, how it's presented, like from the original kind of like um, download, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
it just misses the point. So,
Mm,
for
got it.
example, just with what you were saying, like there's a part of your profile of your body graph that is called a profile.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fraction looking number. And if you just look at that, like if it's just one number over the other,
Right.
doesn't give you much hints over it. But then normally you will see two words after it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel sometimes the words that are associated with the profiles just miss the mark. So, for example, in your case, you will have something that is called like a hermit opportunist. It's
I
like,
saw that.
is that to begin with? And that's, I found through my design that one of the main things that I have within myself is the capacity to refine language.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, if, and I've known this for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
but then now, it was almost like I met the system that told me that I'm here to refine language with an unrefined language. So I'm like, what do I do?
Do you
And
mean that area of your chart was undefined?
no, so that is defined. Like it
Oh,
is
that
defined
is defined. Okay.
to refine language wherever I go in the things that I do, to be really mindful about the language that I use.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was presented, this system presented that to me as
Mm-hmm.
a consistency in my energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also presented the opportunity to refine it.
Oh, I understand.
One of the things that I really love about how I've come to interpret it and to read it and to experiment with it is through a refinement of language.
Mm-hmm.
So in your case, for example, that hermit opportunist, I would be like, I would dare to change it into like the natural connector. There's a like the
Oh.
hermit energy Yeah, it's like that energy is not so much about hermiting as we understand it, like
Hmm.
kind of like secluded or whatnot. You can still be very extroverted,
Right.
but there's a part of you that needs to flow effortless.
Hmm.
There's a part of you that would be really enriched by tapping into the things that you are very that come very natural to you. And when you're in resistance to the things that come natural to you because maybe you learned that like hard work is the thing, or
Hmm.
that doing things that are really challenging is what gets you a reward, whatever, you tap out into from the things that are naturally yours to grab. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like that hermit energy.
You
And
are blowing my mind right now, if I may pause you, because I'm head to toe goosebumps, because that has been recently like my big revelation about myself. I keep asking myself, what are the things that I do naturally? What if I double down on those things that already come easily to me? What if I just refined those versus continually looking for the parts of me that I find are wrong or not good enough and continue to strive for that level of achievement?
oh gosh, yes, I have goosebumps all over as you're talking to. So it's like a goosebump party.
You're right.
And then to continue with that example, you have that four, which in human design language it's called the opportunist. And I'm like, what is that? What's the energy behind that?
It's
It
usually a negative, right? If you're an
it's
opportunist, usually you take advantage of someone else, right?
exactly. What it actually means is that you're a connector. And you naturally thrive in environments and situations that allow you and help you to connect
Mm.
and to connect with other people. And that in marrying those two energies, that two and that four, or that hermit and that connector, there is a part of you that comes very natural to you.
Mm-hmm.
And when that is also supported by your natural way of weaving people together, of communicating, of bringing, different worlds into contact, wow,
Yeah. I mean, this
totally
is
different.
something I just have been coming to terms with, human design being another layer of that, about how that's how I naturally flow. I prefer collaboration. And I'll just use myself as an example because I know there's a lot of people that have been raised in an environment where the goal was to be the boss, right? To be like an entrepreneur, to be like the head of whatever company or, Fortune 500, blah, blah, blah. And when I strive toward that, it doesn't work, right? I continually am met with resistance within myself, with outside of myself. I don't feel good. I don't like it. So when I finally allowed myself at 38 years old to be like, maybe I don't want to be the boss. Like maybe I feel better when I'm working within collaboration. Now, I don't think that means that I'll never be in a position of leadership, but it's different than telling people what to do.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So thank you. Thank you. And I hope somebody else got some grace from that, some permission to just not have to be the boss or be the, what is it, the boss chick or whatever is in vogue now.
Girl boss.
Girl boss, thank you. I even like blocked it from my own brain. That's where I'm at right now.
And I genuinely think that when like that's the thing for me, at least in my experience, what human design really gave me at the very beginning when I started experimenting with it and understanding it and all these things was this huge permission slip to be myself and to forget about the freaking rest that I have been expecting myself to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that comes across when I was soft stalking you on the internet in preparation for this interview. It comes across in all your wording, in all your website. I was
Mm.
like, this is it. This is allowing people to see that they're not damaged in any way. They just haven't connected with themselves. They haven't had the opportunity to meet themselves as they truly are and accept that and find joy in that and celebrate that thing that makes them magical.
Totally. 100%.
Because I
100%.
think inversely, what we're taught through social media and everything else in marketing is find the problem and then offer the solution, right? And it works. I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but what it does to us as a society, I think it forces us to constantly be thinking about what doesn't work in us, what is broken in us, what do we need to fix versus what's already there for us to uplift and amplify and share.
100%. And these, like, let's say, like, in the entrepreneurial field, or like in people that are really wanting to do their thing, this radically changed my paradigm of how I show up for my business. And it has, I've seen how it has changed in front of my eyes in the past 10 months. And it's this idea, like, when you're always focused outside, and when you're focused on, like, what do other people need, and like all these things, you miss the mark within yourself. And like, just to give you an example, like, for the longest time, I had been taught that I needed to have these, like, external person that I needed almost to create in my mind that I was going to serve.
Yes.
But there were all these beautiful things that I wanted to create that I didn't know how to match with that external thing that I was trying to match it to. And the moment that I realized that I could just literally drop that whole customer avatar, if you will,
Right.
and focus on the thing that really lit me up, and that was the thing that was going to connect with my people, that I didn't need to make a whole description of who she was and where she lived and what she did. Like, none of that matters ultimately. And it's entering this different paradigm of business, of how you run, ultimately how you run your life.
Yeah.
That includes your business, your relationships, your health, your vitality, your creativity. And I feel it offers a really beautiful roadmap, because ultimately it's not like, human design is not something that you need to believe in, and it's not something that you need to, like, take for face value, you know?
Right.
Take whatever you learn, take whatever, you know, like, if you get a reading or whatever, you take that and you experiment with it. When you experiment with it, then you know if that thing is true for you or not, because you will feel it in your body. And that's also something that I personally feel it's really important. And that's something that I say in all my readings, in all my courses, in all my everything, is like, I want you to experiment with this.
Yeah.
Don't leave it in your head, because whatever, you know, the next thing will come and that will take that space, you know?
Right.
But
That's what it.
to your body, and you have an experience with it, and it lives in your, like, you really recognize that in yourself. Wow.
Yeah. It's really awesome. And I've heard you say before that it's not, even though it's a roadmap, right? It's a representation of the energies you have inside your body. It by no means is the, like, key or instruction manual to how you should live your life. Right? Even though we all want that, right? Like, there is a part of me that desperately wants you to be like, Kristen, here's what you need to do with your life. And there's another part of me that knows that even if you did that, I wouldn't listen, right?
Exactly. Because ultimately, I shouldn't need to tell you what your thing is. And I think that can get a little bit tricky in the realm of, like, readings, for example. Like, that people just take this, like, as this is how it should be. No, I want you to experience with it, like, have an experience with it and feel for yourself. And the beautiful thing is, like, ultimately, maybe you experimented with one particular thing and, you know, it didn't resonate with you or whatever. But maybe 6 months from now, you remember the conversation that we had and that thing that you were thinking, and then suddenly everything makes sense. It was also a matter of timing. It was also a matter of things unfold the way that need to unfold. And sometimes I feel like in that desire of wanting to know ourselves more, we kind of, like, want to rush the process.
Yeah.
And it's an unfolding, you know? It's also why, like, in human design, they say, like, that you need 7 years to decondition yourself. It takes 7 years for you to fully integrate this information. And quite frankly, I don't think that you're ever done, you know?
Right.
But I guess, like, the first 7 years is, like, the first full flush of a lot of stories, of a lot of things that maybe were in the way from you embodying your truth.
Yeah, because there's so many stories that we need to examine about ourselves. Like, if you're in your 30s, you've had 30 plus years of culture, your parents, society, ancestors, everyone, media, telling you who you should be or how the world works or what their vision of success is, and or relationships. That was a big one for me. To be able to go back and analyze, like, is this true for me? Is that what I want in my life, or is just what I've seen and therefore think is possible?
Right, right. And then how that, it takes it's almost like if you go into a garden and you pick that, like you go into like
Mm-hmm.
your your conditioning garden, and you see like, oh, where did this came from? And like, where did this came from? And you can pick them out. And sometimes that's enough. You just like see them, you recognize them, you pull them. Awesome.
Right.
And sometimes like I don't know, you're distracted for 3 days and then you look back and it's there again. Like,
Right.
gosh, like let me pull this thing again. And it takes repetition, and it takes patience.
Yes. Or the outside world reminds you that you're not done. That's happened to me where I'm like, I have completely resolved all my relationship issues. I'm good now. And then the very next day, it's like poof, being hit by a truck. You're like, no, you're not done. How about this?
I genuinely love those moments where we feel like, oh, like I'm totally done with this like lifelong with this lifelong journey that I'm on, and then like the next day it's like the universe is like, no baby, you're still in it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I'm very careful not to state those things out loud anymore. I'm like, oh, I
I
don't know.
don't, I don't do that either. I know that like the moment that I state it out loud, it's like, ugh, I've summoned the test.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that being said, the tests, right, or the challenges that we have, I've heard you say that you can kind of see on your graph, on your human design chart, those areas that we find really easy and those areas that we maybe need some lessons in or we need to explore a little deeply. Can you explain a little bit how when a person looks at their chart, there's spaces that are highlighted or bold
Yep,
and there's spaces that are seem empty?
exactly. So the places that are highlighted, or colored in, better said, like the
Hmm.
little like geometrical shapes inside that body graph that you see colored in, are the areas in your life that are consistent. And it's like the energy that it's always available to you. And
Hmm.
the ones that you see white are the places where you came here to learn.
Hmm.
So in those defined centers, which are the ones that are colored in, you can also get conditioned out of them. Like you can also, receive imprints around those centers, although you have that consistent energy. So the
Hmm.
deconditioning process of those centers is going to look way more like peeling off the layers to release the natural energy that is there. As opposed to in the undefined centers, which are the ones that
Hmm.
are pure white in your chart, um, the deconditioning process of that looks more like unlearning a
Hmm.
whole bunch of things and then relearning, like reinstalling new things, because these are areas of your life where you come receptor, like you're a receptor of that energy.
Oh, okay.
There are different filters. So you're a receptor of the energy in your undefined centers. So you gotta unlearn all that stuff that has been put in there, let's call it like that,
Hmm.
and then develop the skills that will help you navigate that with much more ease.
Okay.
It brings
That's
different like flavors and different challenges, and it's really beautiful to see it like that. And the other thing that I also say about that is like the centers that you have defined are kind of like the things that come natural to you, that are like
hmm.
the things that you brought into this life with you. And
Hmm.
the undefined ones is like, if life was a university, these are like the credits that you're here to learn. These are the things that your
That's a good
soul said,
example.
I want to learn how to become really wise and really skillful in these
Hmm.
areas. Some people have a full, undefined body graph. Those are
Hmm.
reflectors. They're 1% of the population, not so frequent to come around. But
Hmm.
if anyone listening maybe opens a chart, and if they see like a fully white chart, that's what it means. You can also have
Hmm.
it fully defined, and it's. I think that it's important to not get like hooked in the okay, if I have it defined, this is how it goes. If I have it undefined, this is how it goes.
Right.
It's ultimately a whole process of deconditioning yourself,
Hmm.
whether that's going to be there, even if you have it all defined, there are going to be things through your upbringing and through your life experience that are going to be more heavily conditioned just by
Hmm.
what you're surrounded by your history, your ancestor history, whatever. So that's kind of like how we navigate through a chart.
Hmm.
And I think that the thing that I love remembering over and over is that this is like the most specifically you thing. Like human
Hmm.
design is also called the science of differentiation. And the whole premise behind it is that we live in a society that tends to homogenize us all.
Hmm.
And it just wants to like flat out all the curves and just make this these like, I don't know, beige sort of society. Doesn't work for anything, obviously, but that's somehow like I don't know, the collective,
Yes.
the collective illusion, or like the collective like disruption in that, in like
Or
the
two
glitch in the system.
dimensional. I always think of it as like, and maybe I'm going out on a limb because I'm kind of obsessed with this idea of how social media might be killing art through the homogenization of us all. Because if we all have to be a niche, right, or have one thing that defines us online in order to be successful, then it doesn't leave room for our multi-dimensional selves to be, to explore, to evolve.
I'm 100% there with you. And I would even dare to move it like one step behind. I think that social media repeats that message,
Hmm.
but I think that has to do more with the paradigm of business that we're in.
Yes.
Like, who said that you needed to focus on one thing? Which is pretty much what happened to me. Like, I struggled through my all my 20s, feeling that I needed to focus on one thing, and there I was with these like ocean of ideas
Yes.
that
Yes.
I just could not stop. And then all that struggle that we were just talking right before about that customer avatar and like that one person, that one problem that I'm here to solve, I
Hmm.
have no clue. Like, and the moment that I understood, for example, in my case, I'm a generator. You're also a
Hmm.
generator, by the way.
Hmm.
um, that I'm a generator and that I have two very like key energies in my profile, which is innovation and creativity. Everything that I've ever wanted to do has to do with that. But the way that I was doing it, I was like forcing it into like these like little stream. It was almost like I was trying to funnel the ocean through a straw.
Right.
That's kind of like how it felt. That's how restrictive it felt. And it was driving me crazy until I started learning more about this and I started learning how to apply human design into my business. And then I realized if it lights me up, that's it.
Hmm.
That's why I do human design and I'm illustrating my first tarot deck.
Hmm.
Two languages apart, like I could almost just like specialize on only one.
Right.
But guess what? I don't want to. I don't want to
Right.
because it really, really feeds me to do both.
Yes.
And I'm letting myself just land in that and break the rules of whatever, like the marketing gurus say, the
Hmm.
online marketers say, whomever, honestly. And
Right.
it works because that's the beauty of it. When
Hmm.
you're like really following the things that are consistent for you, the things that are there for you, and bring a little bit of that rebel spirit in and just
Right.
break some of those rules, it's freaking cool.
Well, it makes me just think of, if we go back to the chakra system, that's the sacral chakra, the ability to live in duality, to be both things at once.
Yep.
It's this whole idea of being like, you have to be an extrovert, you have to be an introvert. There's also introvert extroverts. And it's like there's no time in my life where I fully feel like any one of those things.
Mhm.
It's the wave. So that language doesn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
And the moment that I allowed myself the grace to just be like, in this moment, I feel like talking, and maybe in 10 minutes I'll be locked in my room with a do not disturb sign.
Mm.
You know?
Mm, mm, mm. Yes, yes. That's like, I think that's the kind of permission that we need to allow ourselves more. And in that way, in my personal experience, and for the people that I've read so far, what I feel is like human design can help you with the language to understand that.
Hmm.
That's how I see it ultimately. It's a language to be able to understand certain things that you may need language for before you actually are able to do them. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because language is such a powerful thing. Like it allows us so much. It can also limit us,
Mm.
obviously. But when we give ourselves that gift and liberate ourselves through a different language that encompasses way more than just, I don't know, the mainstream rules.
Yeah, it helps us
It's
define
fascinating.
ourselves more. Like when you said you're a connector, I'm like, "Phew," that lit up something in my brain that I could grasp onto, right?
Mhm.
Versus
Mhm.
something more ambiguous or something that feels forced upon me.
Right.
But there is something interesting that you said in another talk I listened to that you said, and if I'm quoting you wrong, please tell me,
Yeah.
that generators make up most of the population.
Yeah.
And so if generators make up most of the population, and generators are the ones that tend to go between these highs and low energies. Like we kind of ride the wave, like we're inspired by something and then we kind of retreat and then we have to be inspired by the next thing. Then the cultural paradigm that we're currently living under is actually destructive to our way of being in the world.
Oh gosh. I mean, it's disruptive for everyone.
Right.
Like, it's not in favor of anyone. However, the thing is that what I've noticed is when there's a generator or a manifesting generator, um, that is really lit up, that is really excited about the work that they're doing, that they wake up like with energy and vitality, and they know how much energy they have, they know when to recharge, they know that rest is an integral part of doing, that doing is just, like the polarity of of that,
Mm-hmm.
the duality of that. Wow, you have like a human that is like incredible to see in
Yeah.
action. However, like because we are 70% of the population together with
Mm-hmm.
manifesting generators, and the conditioning around that sacral energy is that you overdo, you overproduce, you overwork yourself, you exhaust yourself. You don't like, you know, how many people in the world do work that they absolutely hate?
Yeah.
That they wake up every morning and it's like a drag to live. That is an
Yeah.
unhealthy sacral.
Mm.
So when you have 70% of the population emitting sacral energy, and that sacral energy is expressed in an unhealthy way, well,
Mm-hmm.
here we are. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that because you're a generator, um, yeah, like basically what it means is that we have, each one of us has individual responsibility on how we manage our energy and how
Mm-hmm.
important that is. And when
Yes.
we start recognizing that and when we start experimenting with that,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like evident, you know, evident that the way that you um, own your energy and the way that you are, that if you do the work to be really, really in alignment with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
it starts showing up in everything that you interact with. People start picking up on it. People are like, oh my God, like I love, this, or I love the energy that you're emitting, even if they don't even understand what the hell is going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the thing, that's the beauty of that. And again, I think the system overall, it's not rigged in anyone's favor.
No.
And what we need is like from inside out, start changing those patterns, start changing those dynamics with the little things and the bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
how we start tipping the boat on the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been considering a lot, especially lately in this past year, with the pandemic particularly, the sacredness of rest,
Mm.
right? Because if we're trained to constantly and consistently be producing, we might rest. We might actually burn out onto the ground, but even when we're burnt out on the ground, we're not fully resting because there's a part of our brain making us feel guilty for being on the floor.
Yep.
Like, what a revelation to be able to be like, yeah, I'm on the floor and this is where I need to be today.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, and
And I recently read something that really blew my mind around rest, and the difference between rest and relaxation.
mhm,
You can be rested and not be relaxed. And I think that that's like what you're saying. Like
yes.
you can be resting, you know, in that rock bottom of your burnout, let's
Right.
say physically resting.
Hmm.
And yet there's not a sense of relaxation in your being.
Hmm.
There are parts that are still unplugged, still disconnected, still exhausted from the
Hmm.
overdrive and the overcommitment and the overstimulation or whatever.
Yeah.
And I love that. I was like, huh, that's such an important thing to
Yes.
notice, because I've noticed myself, and this is also something that has been my own process to learn how to rest. Um, but then now I feel like, huh, refinement, like moment to refine that language, to relax, like deep relaxation. What does that feel like? And then I have moments where I definitely nail it and I feel that and I feel the relaxation in my whole body. And there are times where yes, I can sleep 9 hours and my body feels rested, but I'm not relaxed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or that idea that we're not resting in order to achieve something later. I think that's a thought I have. Probably a lot of people have it too. Is like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
resting now. I'm giving myself this hour so I could like super produce after this, you know?
And that's a really tricky one. I feel like if you are in that super, super duper intense productive mentality, this might be step one. It might be step one to trick, quote unquote, yourself into relaxing so you can keep producing.
Mm,
But there is a moment where you gotta like move on to the next step, which is like, I need to rest because I need rest.
right. And it feels good and I
And
want
it
to.
feels good. And it's part of life, it's part of the same cycle.
Mhm.
And that's also something that I feel we just forget.
Right. And it brings me back to something that really like sparked something in me when I heard you say it on another call, which was consistency, which is something I struggle with, versus potency. Now, I'd
Hmm.
like you to define that, but I've been stuck. I had in the past, pre-pandemic, I was trying to be consistent because that's apparent. I mean, that's what people tell you is what makes you successful, right? Is to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. But when I was finally forced to pause, I was like, I hate everything about this. Everything I'm doing is no longer resonating with me, or maybe I just don't want to do it as much.
Oh,
So if you could describe that wave for us.
I feel you 100%. I was exactly in the same place. And when I heard this idea of consistency, of potency over consistency, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, yes, yes,
Mm,
give me more of that juice, please.
yes.
So we have this idea of consistency and what you just said, like we're kind of like taught that that's the way to success, that's the way of like how we achieve things, that's how dreams are come true, right? That
Hmm.
is this consistent hammering, right?
Right.
What we have seemed to forget is the energy that is emanating that consistency.
Mm.
So if the energy under that consistency is like a lack of energy,
Right.
you're literally just hammering, and you can hammer forever and you can post whatever you want and you can
Mm.
create as much as you want and you can, but it's never going to have a resonance because there's no juice behind it.
Right.
So the potency really, what I've come to realize, and it's become my experience, is like the consistency is beautiful when there's energy behind that,
Hmm.
but we can never do like something endlessly.
Right.
As opposed to the potency is like, maybe I don't post every day.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't put a podcast every week. But when I do, man, you're gonna get like the like, you're gonna get a golden nugget.
Right. Right.
I think that it's up to us also to start training, quote unquote, our people.
Mm.
That we're not always on, that we're not
Right.
always producing, that we're not always creating, that, that for some people, the model of weekly or bi-weekly or whatever that works. For me, like that was also something that I realized, that I was like, I've been trying to do this for so long like, and feeling like a failure for not being able to commit long term to something.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was really hard on like my perception of my self-worth. And when I realized that I could just not, that what I needed to do was just like inform people that I wanted to do things different, and that I was not going to put a podcast every day, every week out.
Hmm.
But when it came out, it was because I felt the need to
Yes.
transmit something. Ah, it's given me so much space, so much permission, so much ease, and room to create things that I really feel excited about, instead of like these I think like it becomes sort of like a drag or like a
Yeah,
over,
yeah.
like you're just like so suddenly like one good day you turn around and you're dragging all these things behind you, and it's like,
Yeah.
wait, what? They were
Yeah.
supposed to be fun. And I think that's
Exactly.
also why, I mean, you probably had that experience, and probably also you listening, you've also had that experience where you started something, you started a project or
Hmm.
an idea or, whatever, and you were really excited. And then somewhere along the way, you said that that was something that you needed to do every single
Yeah.
day. You kill it.
Yes.
And then after a
Yeah.
month of that, you're like, screw that, whatever thing that I decided I was going to do, I'm like,
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
And I think that I definitely believe that that's because we hammer in the consistency as a
Yes.
formula. Like we believe that consistency is the key to success, and it's
Hmm.
not.
It's not, I actually, that made me think. I've been wanting to write a post, but I can't, like, I haven't put it all together yet. And I wanted to name it, Are We Bored Yet? Because I feel like because everyone feels the need to constantly be producing, constantly be posting, constantly be writing, constantly be doing podcasts, videos, whatever, the information, most of the information that's being put out is not interesting in the least, doesn't help anyone, and is just like regurgitated garbage. And then we all feed into that. We're like, oh, yes, round of applause. And I'm like, are we really doing anything with of value?
Yes, 100%. Is there anything that comes from you and
Mm-hmm.
not like because I feel like what you need to allow yourself a certain amount of not doing
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be open enough to receive
Yes.
from whatever you want to call it, the universe, God, source, inspiration, curiosity, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in this constant like pushing things out, like constant like exporting things out, where is the moment that you actually harvest, right?
Right.
That you actually like create some space to let something drop in that then you can share. Obviously, yes, like if it's useful and you find it amazing, why not? Bring it
And
bring it
and
forward.
also
We need it.
give time for these ideas to like bloom within you, because I feel like we always have the need to, the moment we have a thought, we have to put it out in the universe, however half baked they are. So we never get to like that revelation or that bigger idea because we just stop ourselves short. We like have a thought and then it's out in the world and then we get feedback. So we never evolve the thought within
Yeah.
ourselves.
You yes, 100%.
So
So
I
good.
love that. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you're here. I feel like so much wisdom has been dropped upon me and so much permission allowed. I know this isn't everything about human design, and it's such a deep
No.
well. So, how can people learn more about human design? How can listeners learn more about you? Whatever you feel like sharing, please do.
Well, I personally think that um, when you see human design, of course, again, going back to what you were saying, there's tons of things on social media to look into. There's tons of videos, things like that. Go with whatever you really resonate with.
Hmm.
Like, really, if honestly, if this was your first human design experiment, if you will, if you decide to go with that, go through, accounts if you find that interesting and see what if there's something that is alive there for you.
Hmm.
And this is going to be personal. You're only going to feel that for yourself. And if that feels good, then go about and learn there, right?
Hmm.
Um, one of the things that I definitely feel it's really, really cool to do in the beginning, and that's something that I did, and I'm really, really happy that I did, was to get
Hmm.
a reading early on.
Yeah.
Because then I'm learning from someone that is able to see me and not just me trying to piece a
Hmm.
really intricate system together.
Yeah.
And then when you get the basics, of course you can go and take it away, read books on
Hmm.
all this stuff. I personally, and this might be just my own version of learning, I really love learning from interaction, like
Yes.
really like from people.
Hmm.
Books are awesome, and I think books for certain subjects and for certain things are incredible, and maybe for a later stage they're even more cool. I
Hmm.
I bought a book, the very first book that I bought on human design. It's a really freaking cool book. But I was really learning. That was even before I got my first reading. And I read it and it was like so like whoa, what like I had the understand I could grasp it, but I was like
Hmm.
ugh, like a little bit
Yeah.
dizzy afterwards. And recently, I don't know what I was I don't know, it just pinged me from the bookshelf. I was like, let me just go and grab it. And I started reading it and I was like, oh God, this is like way more juicy than I thought. But
Yeah.
it's not because I have the foundation and I have a good base. So if this conversation has struck you like any good amount of good vibes and you want a reading, I would love for you to come my way. Also, like I give human design readings and I love it. It's one of my biggest pleasures to do that and to see and explore um, your design. It's fascinating for me from the perspective of like, I love being a student of this.
Hmm.
Besides the fact that I love sharing it and I love finding ways to teach it and like, but again, like refining the language and sharing those perspectives. I love that. But that is only because I'm equally in love with the process of learning.
Yeah.
Um, so that is like, let's say like like the very particular specific way that you can learn about it. And really it's really about learning yourself. And then if
Hmm.
you're really curious and this really sparks joy in you and you want to bring this either into your offerings or into the way that you do your life or your business, or maybe like, I don't know, pull up the charts of your family and your kids and your partner and your mom and your dad, like
Yeah.
it's fascinating. Like
It's
all
so much fun. That's why I felt like when I was into astrology, I thought the beauty of it when I pulled up everybody's chart, it not only allows you to see them as like a human, a spiritual human being, but how all these parts are interconnected and how we all have our gifts. And if we just honor each other's gifts, then I don't know, world peace. I don't know where we go with this, but it just is beautiful.
Yes,
So I imagine
definitely.
it's the same thing that when you pull human design charts, you're able to see like, oh, this person carries these energies, which like makes this happen in the world and maybe combines with this person's other energies. I mean, it's just so cool.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So that's kind of like the readings. And I also have these two other offerings that are a self-paced exploration
Mm-hmm.
on the sacral, which is something that we talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have it defined or undefined, it really doesn't matter. I'll walk you through what that means in either or case. And it also helps you ground into the richness. It's called sacred sacral for a reason. Like there's so much sacred energy there.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are with it, if it's 70% of the population that have it defined, well, 70% of us will definitely benefit from learning how to tap into our sacral energy. And the rest of the 30% will definitely thank us for doing that. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like they're definitely gonna live in a better world if we learn how to do
agreed.
that. Also for them, of course, like for people like projectors, manifestors, reflectors, knowing how to tap into their own sacral energy is
Mm-hmm.
really, really valuable. And the other one is golden heart, which is kind of like inverse, like 70% of the population have the heart undefined,
Mm-hmm.
meaning we are here to learn about what the heart is about, which is ultimately about money, value, and self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
So that one is really interesting in the way that we can put certain concepts together that will help us understand that a little bit more and a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
And because again, like I'm all in for experimentation, so it will give you great tools to take it away and see how that changes your experience.
So when you say that most of us have an undefined heart, does it mean that we were born needing to learn how love works in the world? I mean, if we think of it in like values of Taurus, right? Like love, self-worth, material possessions, all of that. We don't come into this world knowing how those things work and how we define those for ourselves.
So the love part, like so in human design, the traditional heart chakra is
Mm-hmm.
kind of like split it in two. Like you will see it
Mm-hmm.
like there's an identity, and
Oh,
that
okay.
has more to do with love and purpose and these things.
Mm-hmm.
And the heart, like the human design quote unquote heart, is all about the material plane. So
Okay.
70% of us sign up to have an experience and to try to figure out what the material plane is based on. And the beauty of it or the trick of it or the it depends on how you want to see it,
Uh,
is that ultimately is deeply rooted in your sense of value. and that you are infinitely valuable and worthy. The only thing from where you are right now and experiencing that is the walls and the conditioning that you have been conditioned under.
Yes.
And this is directly, indirectly, verbally modeled and transgenerational. Like it's a whole big bag.
Yeah, like what a university to sign up for, right? Because
Yeah.
now, the moment you say that, it's like the things that have been for the ideas that have been forced upon you. If you are a woman making up more than 50% of the population, any marginalized person, immigrant, refugee, Black person, like you are being told on a continuous basis that you have less value. So it's like signing up for a really like difficult course in what is my value and can I generate that for myself because my society is telling me no.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I don't hope to have all the answers to this. I'm sharing from the things that I have learned in my experience. I think that the more of us that are doing this work and figuring this out, the more ripple effect of that we can generate for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I 100% recognize where I'm coming from, like my privileges, my way of like, being in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a really interesting place to go to, regardless of, where you've been. And the beauty of this is like, it's an energetic blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
So we can also see it from that level. Like we can see it from the energy level. And then of course it has an impact on all the conditions and the stories and the rules that we've made up in the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like we can start working through the energy, so then that energy has an effect in the material. Absolutely. Rather than working like matter versus matter, because ultimately that's just going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, it seems like taking a Buddhist lens, it would be like working towards your own liberation, being able to see yourself as yourself and that holding value and being an example of liberation for others so that everyone can be free.
Yeah, definitely. And that your liberation is intrinsically linked with the liberation of everyone else.
Yes.
I love that.
Absolutely. So I know someone wants to reach out to you. Where do they find you?
You can find me at Nourishing Witch on Instagram. I only hang out there in the socials, so that's like my favorite place to be. And my website is nourishingwitch.com. And there you can go and check it out. There's the page where you can book the readings if you want a reading. If you want to DM me and talk to me a little bit about, if you have any questions around human design, to be honest. Not specifically about your design, because I think that that's like actually what we do when we get into a reading. Right. But if there's like, okay, like how does this work? Or like just like a little bit of like that kind of curiosity around the system. Maybe it's something that is really new for you and you're like, what is all this again?
Yeah, more general questions that you want to be pointed in the right direction.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, I loved having you on the podcast.
Thank
I know
you.
I'll be seeing you on the interwebs, and maybe we'll have you back to talk about something else, some new offering you have, or some cool concepts.
Yes,
this was fantastic. Yeah, I know folks got a lot out of this. So thank you for being here. Like you mentioned, everyone can find you on Instagram and on your website. We'll also post you up on our website, wearewildwonder.com. And you can find this podcast on YouTube and anywhere you find your favorite audio channels. So thanks again, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.